Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. The Supreme Court has given Trump an enormous victory with presidential constitutional immunity for official acts. An official act is speaking to an attorney, like Michael Cohen, for example. It is not eliminating a political opponent. Anyone who says that is a complete imbecile. It is, for example, speaking to a Department of Justice official or a Republican in a red state, or an official act can be speaking to a lawyer. So they indicted and want to imprison Trump on speaking to a lawyer or paying a lawyer, in this case, Michael Cohen. The problem is that the federal commission, the FEC, the federal government agency, did not indict Trump. The DOJ, Biden's Department of Justice, did not indict Trump for a federal crime. The federal government said Trump did not commit a crime. The New York state government said that he did. Sorry, you can't have that. That's unconstitutional. The Department of Justice dropped the hush money case for a reason, because there was no crime. There is an issue, a constitutional issue of jurisdiction. A state cannot level a federal charge without the federal government involved. Newsweek, Donald Trump attempts to delay sentencing. National Review. The judge should grant Trump's motion to postpone September sentencing. Fox News. Interference. Trump lawyers call for delayed sentencing. MSNBC News. Interesting. Trump's immunity remark could be vindicated by the Supreme Court. It will be, ladies and gentlemen. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. We'll get to price controls and the hilarious way Democrats are trying to tackle the inflation that they caused. Hit subscribe to this channel. To my super chat, thank you. We're on our way to 265,000 subscribers, people. You could be the 265th,000. I'm hoping to get 300,000 subs before November 5th, but we'll get it sometime in November, God willing. Let's listen to this.
September 18th on your calendar. Certainly Donald Trump and the people around him have, as Judge Wentworth Sean in that hush money case, the sentencing is set for that date. So there is the distinct possibility Donald Trump could be serving time in jail. We don't know how much time, if it comes to pass at all, if it would come before the...
Let's assume they want him to go to Rikers. Let's assume they want him to go to jail. That would expedite the Supreme Court. Supreme Court only needs 4 justices to look at a case. In this case, it would be a writ that Mark Levin was talking about. There's various ways to expedite the Supreme Court looking at this. This is a constitutional issue. A state cannot indict a person under a federal crime when the federal government was not involved. There are other issues, too. The Bill of Rights, they tore up the Bill of Rights when trying to imprison Trump. If they imprison him, immediately it goes to the Supreme Court, or even before that. I'm not sure the Supreme Court, I'm hoping the Supreme Court before sentencing. But once it gets there, 100% certainty they'll overturn the absurd conviction and jail sentence.
The election, he wants to put this off until at least after the election. Saul Weisenberg, the former deputy independent counsel, Fox News contributor. Saul, great to have you. What are the odds of Donald Trump being sentenced to prison?
Well, I can't give you the exact odds with this particular judge, Neil. It's certainly possible, and it's outrageous that he did not continue the sentencing date given the issues involved with immunity. But I can tell you this: if he does sentence former President Trump to time, if the judge follows the law, Trump will be out on bond pending appeal, because
I don't think they're going to give Trump that luxury. I think they're going to try every single way to imprison him. I always would say that there's not 1 second he'll step foot in a jail cell. Okay, I'll amend that. He didn't commit a crime. It's unconstitutional what they did, and corruption convictions, for example, are overturned all the time. One unanimously in 2016 against the Virginia governor. A case brought by, none other than Jack Smith. But they might desperately want to imprison this man. Now, it would be 1 day, 2 days, but I don't trust, the Secret Service bureaucracy, the individual Secret Service agents, God bless them. They're heroes and they're brave and they're courageous men and women. But the people calling the people making the decisions, the higher ups in the federal bureaucracy, I don't trust at all. And you would have the Secret Service defending Trump in Rikers Island even for a day. I don't trust that. His life is at risk, and I think Democrats are trying everything possible to create that type of scenario. The Supreme Court gets involved immediately if he's sentenced to prison. And really, they should get involved before that. I think that they will.
There are very important immunity-related issues that have to be litigated post-trial.
Now, the judge says he's not influenced by political considerations. So, having said that, I don't know which way it cuts. If he sends, the former president to jail, and as you said, you raised this issue with Bond and making it go away on the former president's part, but it would actually potentially help Donald Trump and garner sympathy and attention to him. So it kind of seems to cut both ways, doesn't it?
I absolutely believe you're right. We have seen what the effect was of the 4 indictments. It had actually, as you know, an energizing effect on the former president in terms of campaign contributions and poll rankings. And so I think there would be a terrible reaction to this. And I think it's probably more likely that that he will allow him, Judge Merchan will allow former President Trump to be out on bail. It would be an...
I don't think that they will do that, with all due respect to the former deputy independent counsel who knows more about New York laws than I do. I think they want to imprison this man. There was an attempt on his life. They tried to indict him. Oh, they did. They convicted him eventually. All the other cases fell through. Like I said, they would. Trump got immunity victories in Colorado. The absurd Colorado ban. I told you he would get the immunity victory. Sorry, the constitutional Supreme Court victory in Colorado, overturning the ban. The constitutional Supreme Court victory pertaining to immunity. I said he would do that. And now I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you 95% certainty he'll win in November 5th. I just don't know if he's going to spend a day in prison or not. In jail. I amend my initial statements that he'll never spend even one day because I don't trust any opposition political party official in the state, in any blue state, to give Trump, to be reasonable or fair or neutral or apolitical or just with Trump. They want, the mugshot didn't work. It's now on actual coffee mugs, and it's actually on shirts. It didn't work. Thank God he lived through an attempt on his life. They've indicted him. It didn't work. He was still above mashed potato brains Biden. Nothing has worked. They want the photo of Trump at Rikers Island to say, look, you might not like Harris, but at least Trump is an actual convict. Look. And that won't work either. But they want that. There are enough independent voters who perhaps don't know enough about politics who will look at that and say, gosh, I just don't want a criminal. So they want to imprison Trump. The Supreme Court, either before or after, will get involved and overturn everything. It's just a matter of, I don't know. This is like one of the few times I'm usually very confident on things I say. I have no clue if he's going to spend a day in jail. I am 100% certain the Supreme Court will overturn the conviction and the jail sentence. He might not be given bail, which is hilarious. He might not be allowed bail, which is hilarious because there's no bail for a whole bunch of crimes in New York and other cities. But they might want him that one day in jail, and that could be really, really, really bad for Trump in terms of his safety.
Incredibly lawless decision for him to order, to both impose a prison sentence and order him to go to jail. It would certainly even in New York State, be overruled pretty quickly. Again, Alvin Bragg did not need to have this problem. He did not have to put former presidential advisors on the stand. But that created an immunity issue, an issue of presidential immunity that can't be ignored in light of the Supreme Court opinion. And I'll tell you something else. Trump's lawyers asked to litigate these immunity issues pre-trial because they knew they were going to be an issue. And at Bragg's urging, Judge Merchan refused to do that. So this is all of his own making. And finally, I want to point out there is absolutely no law enforcement reason for Trump to be sentenced on September 16th. It's obviously a political decision and an attempt to influence the presidential campaign.
They want the 5 to 10% of independent voters who aren't really into politics, who will look at that and say, golly, Trump is in jail. He must have done something really bad. I can't vote for somebody who's been in jail. And they won't realize that it's purely partisan. It's the most sinister form of bureaucratic manipulation. They manipulated the legal system to go after their political opponent in the most overt attempt at interfering in November. And so they're not going. There's 5% of independent voters who just don't get it. They don't understand. They look at the news and they don't like inflation and they don't like high interest rates. They don't like the foreign policy catastrophe around the world. And they're like, gosh, I just don't want my president to be. Even if Democrats are doing this to Trump, I just don't want to. They will go there. And that's what Democrats are after. But I think we'll have a stock market bubble burst, a financial downturn in October, actually, unfortunately. Anyway, let's continue. And that'll cement Trump's victory. But the Supreme Court gets involved either before or after sentencing. I have no clue if he goes to prison one day, jail in Rikers one day. Jail, not prison. If he does, it'll be overturned immediately. Hopefully it's overturned before that.
These are important immunity-related issues that need to be litigated post-trial here because they weren't done pre-trial.
So what is a middle ground on this? If the bail is accepted and you push this off, would the judge be indicating what the sentencing would be on September 18th, even though it might not come into effect till after the election? Then all bets are off after the election, assuming in this case Donald Trump is elected president again. Then, of course, it potentially goes away, but I don't know about that. But would the judge then...
When he wins, there's a special counsel. He will have like 2 or 3 special counsels, just like Democrats did. But he'll probably have 2 special counsels at the same time, which will probably address a lot of the issues we're seeing now.
Likely give a sentence, his idea of the sentence, say not imposable until after the election.
Well, first of all, we know what he's going to rule. We think we know what he's going to rule on the immunity issue because he told everybody, I'm going to rule on immunity 2 days before the sentencing. So if he was going to toss the case or send it back at least for retrial based on the presidential immunity argument, I don't think he would have done that. So there is, I think he's going to reject the immunity arguments. I think he's going to impose sentence on the 18th, you said, and I think because they want it to be something that can be talked about during the campaign and during the early voting period. You're right. I believe if a sentence, there is no way if Trump is elected and serving as president that he's going to be doing any time while he is president. I can assure you of that.
Well, that was my next idiotic question, and you're very patient with all of them. But so that if he is sentenced, and he does win back the presidency, he could make this go away, right? Or can he make it go away only when he is inaugurated as president, not merely because he was elected president?
Well, it's not so much that. First of all, it's a state issue. He can't pardon himself for a state crime. We don't even know if he can pardon himself for a federal crime. If there is a sentence that is yet to be imposed when he becomes president, in that event, it's not so much that Trump can make it go away. It's the operation of federal constitutional law that will make it go away. I can't believe there's any federal court in the country, particularly given the Supreme Court's opinions in this area of executive power. They are not going to impose a prison sentence on a sitting president, even for something that was done before he was president. That would have to wait until his term was over. But
now, I respectfully disagree. I think what they'll try to do, they are going to sentence Trump to jail, almost certainly. They are going to almost certainly actually want him to go to jail. They'll want that. They will want him to step foot in Rikers Island with his Secret Service. The problem is that it was an unconstitutional conviction. They talk about democracy. They make a mockery. Democrats have made a mockery of democracy. And from 2016 with Bernie Sanders getting railroaded and him doing nothing about it, to 2024 when Biden won his delegates and won the primary, and they actually just laugh at the notion that anyone should be questioning Biden's victory in the primary and then his ousting and then Harris's ability to take over all the delegates that she didn't win, that Biden won, which is only Democrats would laugh and scoff at the notion that anybody would criticize them for this. Okay, there's zero meritocracy in the Democratic Party. It's a machine, and that's why Harris doesn't do press conferences or interviews. The machine, it's vote for the machine or Donald Trump. That's it. The machine says, well, vote for us. At least we're not Trump's personality. Trump is so mean and rude, and oh my God, and he's going to go to jail. The machine, if you're voting for the machine, don't complain about financial downturn, inflation, chaos abroad and in foreign policy. You're voting for it. Okay, you vote for Trump, you get a great economy, which is what we had. Great foreign policy. His last year in office, it was Democrats and bureaucrats and media that shut down economic activity. It was a choice. It was a foolish, sinister choice. Nobody had to shut down economic activity. That was a choice. And falling back to a consensus of fools is also a very nasty, counterproductive thing to do. If you always explain and if you always defend stupid decisions by saying, well, all the smart people said it was good to do, you won't have a very good life. Okay, and we're seeing the problems with what took place. Trump wanted to open up. Everyone said, defying experts. The experts could be wrong, and they've been wrong, from 2016 on to today. They've been wrong more so than they've been right. But let's continue.
The whole thing is, we can't get lost in the forest because we're looking at the trees, because this was clearly... Right. This New York State prosecution was clearly a political prosecution from the get-go. So
very quickly then, flip it around, Donald Trump loses the election. The protections or the sort of shield that he sought and his lawyers sought, that goes away as well, right?
But because of Alvin Bragg, not necessarily entirely in this case, because he put those presidential advisors on the stand in that state trial. And they testified about conversations that they had with Trump. And under the Supreme Court's opinion, those are presumptively privileged conversations. And so the question would be, how much did this affect the verdict in the New York case? And the prosecutors talked about those presidential advisors in the closing argument, and they said it was devastating. So stay tuned.
All right.
It's not even a crime for him to have paid Stormy. And we're going to find that out right now. That was brilliant analysis by this gentleman from New York. Let's go to Hans A. von Spakovsky. He's a former Federal Election Commission chairman.
Well, I have the same reaction Francie Hakes does. This is a travesty, a miscarriage of justice. This was a phony prosecution from the very beginning. And for this jury, think about how many weeks this trial went on, how many witnesses came in, and in the very short time that the jury was out, they decided he was guilty on all 34 charges. This is a damage to the reputation of the American justice system like we have never seen. I have a colleague just got back from a conference overseas, and the reaction of lawyers and people there was that the United States has now gotten to be like the countries they are from, where the government uses its law enforcement powers to go after its political opponents. And that, I think, is exactly what happened here.
Hans, what was the underlying federal campaign?
There was no underlying federal campaign violation. That's why it's unconstitutional. And this is the former FEC chairman stating that.
Violation. Did we ever find that out?
Well, you know, there was nothing in the original indictment about any kind of federal campaign violation. They kept saying that the legal expenses, which is what were listed in the business records, should have been a campaign-related expense, the payment that was made to Stormy Daniels. But as Brad Smith, I know, would have testified, under the test applied by the FEC, this was not a campaign-related expense, period. There's just no question about that. So for this jury to say that, oh yeah, he violated federal campaign finance laws and that justifies the underlying verdict, that is such an egregious mistake that the Court of Appeals in New York, when they get this case, they ought to reverse this almost immediately because of this and so many other mistakes made in the case.
How many do you count? How many mistakes?
I lost count of how many errors were made by this judge and by the prosecution. I mean, the judge let in all kinds of irrelevant evidence that had no bearing on the charges against the president, but were obviously there to blacken the character of Donald Trump. The judge shouldn't have even been on the case. He should have recused himself because of his personal family dealings, his daughter's involvement, his making political contributions in violation of the ethics rules in New York. There are just so many mistakes and errors he made that I don't see how a Court of Appeals could not overturn this verdict.
So the verdict should have already been overturned, but it takes a long time in New York. Everything will be expedited in September. Now, if hopefully they postpone the sentencing, and they could postpone the sentencing to October. So you could have Trump being sentenced a week before November 5th, like late October, which would be hilarious. The best thing is that if they postpone it, the worst thing, well, actually, the worst thing for Democrats and the worst thing for the country is that they jail Trump, and then a day later, the Supreme Court overturns the conviction. That would be the best thing for Trump, but it would be one of the worst things ever for the country because you would have a president, a presidential candidate where the opponent, the opposition party, tried to imprison him on unconstitutional grounds. And they would then pass they would write a bill to abolish the Supreme Court immediately. And Democrats wouldn't even question whether or not that would hurt democracy. That's how far off the deep end they are in terms of tribalism.
Dave Malpass, former president of the World Bank.
This is Now we're going to switch topics really quickly on Kamala Harris's price controls.
Michael Faulkner, former Assistant Treasury Secretary and the FBI Chief Economist. Gentlemen, there's a lot to parse through here. Faulkner, start with you. I mean, apart from all the, price controls and central planning and bring back Richard Nixon and FDR and Joe Stalin and Maduro and all this stuff that's swirling around, it's amusing if it weren't serious business. What's this going to cost? I didn't see in her speech today any mention of cutting back on federal spending or federal deficits or federal borrowing. Nothing. But I did see a lot of programs that are being priced out by you and others. What do you is this? I don't see how this can be under $2 trillion.
No, you're exactly right, Larry. It is on the verge of $2 trillion because the child tax credit alone is more than $1 trillion. The homeowners assistance for first-time home buyers is looking at coming in at about $250 billion. The healthcare expansion is another $400 billion. You've got the baby bonuses that are coming in at about $100 billion. And so you start adding it all up, and you're right, Larry, over a 10-year budget window, you're looking at $2 trillion. And no, they have not provided details on how they're going to pay for it, because they always go back to the canard of raising taxes on the wealthy, raising taxes on corporations. But as you just pointed out, tax cuts for corporations flow through to consumers via lower prices and to higher wages for workers. And so if she really wants to tackle inflation, she would leave the corporate tax code where it is, if not cut corporate rates even more so that people can afford all of these different things rather than relying on government.
So, David Malpass, if you like government, you're going to love this plan, right? If you don't like government, you're not going to love this plan. I mean, I like to try to simplify it. My opening riff had far too much detail. I regret that. But I mean, isn't that it? Government, 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 government. That's what I'm seeing.
She's doubling down on government controlling people and the economy. I've got an analogy for you. It's like they gave her the ball. She's running 5 yards. She fumbles because each time she gets a chance to make a decision, it's the wrong decision. So this one's really harmful because if you said, give me the 5 worst ideas you can do, they picked all 5 of them. That's taxes, price controls, the write-off of the debts, and so on down. Energy prices will be higher. And so the thing that strikes me is this is somebody that didn't have to go through the primaries, so nobody's had a chance to really ask her questions. What are you going to do different than Biden? And what are you going to do to actually allow the economy to go, to grow and go? And her first decisions were ones that would stop it. It's like the brakes. I'm ready to put the brakes on Biden's economy. That's what she's saying.
Actually, you know what's interesting? You just made me think of it. Her very first decision was to appoint this far left Minnesota Governor Walz. Okay, he's a real lefty progressive. All right, so that gives you a hint where her heart is, where her DNA is.
So Democrats said, oh, Walz, he's a good salt of the earth. Good Midwestern man. He's a good man. He's like the salt of the earth Biden, with better cognitive abilities and younger and more, with more meat on his bones. He's a good man. He thinks that socialism is neighborly. He's a good person, Tim Walz. And if he's a good person, and you can relate to him because he's a good Midwesterner, and he likes Harris, then you should like her too. You should vote Democrat also. That's the calculus. That's the meanwhile, anyone who knows anything about politics is like, this person is not right about anything. And the reason they got him is because Trump is doing well in Minnesota. He was actually up in Minnesota against Biden. I don't know what the polls are now, but he can't be too far behind. I'll check right now.
And now her second big decision is this big price controls, big government economic plan that will never have any way to pay for itself. I mean, you know what it is? Faulkner, it's like, I think there's a misunderstanding here. I think that Kamala and her advisors, which are mostly former Biden advisors, some of them from Elizabeth Warren advisors, but they believe that rising prices cause inflation. But the problem is, rising prices are a function of inflation. They don't cause it, they're a result, a consequence. And inflation, you can.
So this is absolutely hilarious. If you go to Real Clear Politics, it had Biden up by 3, but I remember seeing Trump like tied or down by 1. Okay. You go Biden, Trump, Biden, it's Biden up 3. But really, it was like close. It was like Biden up 2. That was Minnesota. Suddenly, Harris, it's Harris up 8. Okay, why? She polled worse than Biden prior to her taking all the delegates he won in a very fair and definitely not politically orchestrated primary. So, can somebody explain that? How do you poll worse than Biden but do better than him in Minnesota after Trump is basically down by 2? And now suddenly he's down by 8. Makes no sense.
You can define it as too much money chasing too few goods. You can find it as a decline in the value of the money in your pocketbook or the value of the dollar. I just think they have a misunderstanding here, okay? So they're going after individual prices, which plays into the government theme. But that's wrong. It's completely wrong. Definitionally, it's wrong. If you keep spending and borrowing, that's the inflation if the Fed accommodates it, right? That will cause all prices to rise, not just a couple prices. And we've got a chart up on the full screen there.
Democrats can't even have a functioning primary. They're going to now control the prices of eggs and bread and oil and gas. So, I mean, they talk about price controls and price gouging. Well, pick an industry. What industry is gouging prices? Wonderful, morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrat? What industry? The oil and gas industry? Great. Then propose a dollar amount, and past that dollar amount, you shall not go. Say that, you know what, we're going to cap oil in the United States of America at $80 per barrel. You're not going to go past $80 per barrel. See how it works? Yeah. She should have a list of, Democrats should have a list of all the commodities and goods and services that they want to be controlled, the price controls. Okay, so oil prices now, WTI crude is $76. Democrats should say it doesn't go above $80, not under our watch, and see what happens to the global economy.
Consumer prices and producer prices, all right? Consumer prices, that's what consumers have to pay. Producer prices, that's what businesses have to pay. They're almost the same. There's no difference. There's no gouging. There's no nothing here except bad policy, Mr. Faulkner.
That's right, Larry, because if you put in place policies that cause every component of your inputs to go up in cost, so whether that's labor costs, whether that's energy costs, transportation costs, manufacturing costs, if all of those things rise and then you increase your price by the same percentage, your margins stay the same. There's no evidence of gouging, and as you pointed out, even the San Francisco Fed showed that that was the case. Because, as you said, their fundamental model is one where they impose massive supply constraints through regulation and taxation, and then they don't like the outcome of that. So what do? They put in place demand subsidies. They provide additional credits, or they provide subsidies for buying homes. And the last time I checked, and I regularly teach Econ 101, right, is that if you curtail supply and then you enhance demand, the new equilibrium is one with no change in output but a lot higher prices. And then they're shocked that they get inflation.
David Malpass, have you ever seen a sheep in sheep's clothing? These are price controls.
They're always that.
Right. These are price controls dressed up as price controls. Okay? That's what they are. I don't care what you call it. And look.
I love Kudlow. I love him. He should have said a wolf in wolf's clothing.
When I went to work at the Federal Reserve in 1973, the New York Fed's first job I ever had out of grad school, Nixon had price controls. Richard Nixon. All right. I want to call him a great American, but I don't know. But the point did price controls work in the United States? I mean, I don't have to go to communism or socialism or Venezuela or the Soviet Union. How about right here? Did price controls ever work? Is there one example in history that price controls ever worked, David Malpass?
No, and it was the downfall of Nixon. It led right into the high inflation, the price increases of the 1970s, and that led to the downfall of Jimmy Carter. And if we look at the Soviet Union, a core part of their downfall was price controls, because that it very quickly caused shortages. So people in the Soviet Union, the poor people that had to live under communism, looked around. They saw the rest of the world with growing production, growing supply of goods, and they took out the regime.
Right.
And so as we think about it, it's an idea that never works. And one thing I think people need to ask her is, does she want more energy in the United States? I don't know what her answer is to that.
Yes,
that
you
means
do.
gasoline prices are going to go up because she basically wants less energy.
You know what the answer
Electricity
is.
prices will go up.
David, you know what I'll give you her cell phone number. You can call her. But you know what the answer to that is, all right? You know what the answer.
So, ladies and gentlemen, here's the deal, man. This is what Biden would say. Here's the deal, man. Here's the deal. September 4th or 5th, I think September 4th, we get the first debate. When's the first debate? Okay, let me just check on my phone right here. Okay, first debate is September 4th. Yeah. So, sorry, September 10th. Okay. The first debate will be September 10th. You then have sentencing September 18th or 16th or 18th. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe. Greatly appreciate it. Yes, September 10th. Then you have sentencing September 18th. Then you have potentially a serious market and financial downturn. Okay? Then you have Trump winning on November 5th. I don't think there's any chance with these completely irrational economic policy ideas, price controls, and all the other nonsense, ignoring inflation, blaming inflation on corporate tax increases. I don't think there's any chance that Trump loses. I mean, I think there's a 95% chance Trump wins, 5% Harris. When she debates, it's going to be like Biden 2.0. It'll be the same thing, whether it's Biden not being able to communicate or Harris communicating a whole, plethora of words that mean really nothing. Trump will win the debate. Of course, media is now all in on Harris and the Democratic Party, so of course they'll say, oh my God, she did so great. There's just no way. There's just no way I see that Trump loses. Because I do think there's going to be a market downturn. Hit subscribe, everybody. Thank you so very much. I also think that, look, if they do sentence him, immediately it gets overturned. Because essentially, with the immunity decision, they've already overturned the conviction. That's why I keep doing these segments. They already overturned the conviction and the jail sentence with the immunity decision. It's just a matter of getting it to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has to look at this, because this is a joke. I mean, could you imagine this nonsense taking place in any other era of American politics? Hit subscribe, everybody. Thanks. I'll see you tomorrow. God bless you all. Thank you. To my super chat, thank you.